Hey hoes! For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kenzie and I'm so happy that you found my channel. Quick side note before we get started. No, I did not dye my hair. No, my hair is not greasy. I actually just washed my hair, so it's still wet. My hair takes a long time to dry, so I wanted to film these videos regardless. It's clean, it smells good, don't worry about it. Today we're going to be talking about the Milwaukee cannibal, Jeffrey Dahmer. So, let's just get right into this disturbed man. Jeffrey Dahmer was born May 21st, 1960 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He was the first of two sons to his parents, Joyce Nett and Lionel Dahmer. Jeffrey's mother was known to be tense, aggressive, and attention-seeking, and she also suffered from depression, which led her to spending a lot of Jeffrey's childhood laid up in bed. So of course this later led Jeffrey to claim that he was neglected and that he just didn't get the attention that children need growing up. He also said that he was unsure of the solidity of his family. So from an early age, Jeffrey actually was very thrilled, whatever the word is, with dead animals. His first encounter with a dead animal was when his father climbed underneath the house and pulled out some dead animal bones, and his father actually recalled that Jeffrey seemed oddly thrilled at the sound the bones were making, and he just seemed oddly thrilled for a 4-year-old. You know, most 4-year-olds would be scared that there was something dead under their house, but he was oddly thrilled and interested. So in 1968, the family actually moved to Ohio, where Jeffrey then started to collect insects and small animals. He would keep them in jars and then keep them in a small hut near his house. So I should mention quickly that Lionel, Jeffrey's father, had a degree or a master's or something like that in chemistry. So the conversation that we're going to be talking about didn't really spark any red flags in the Dahmer family, because they just thought that Jeffrey was interested in what his father did for work. However, at a chicken dinner, they were having chicken for dinner, Jeffrey asked his father what would happen if you put the bones in bleach. Keep in mind, Jeffrey was 10 at the time, which I don't, like, to me, being 24 years old, to this day, other than this case, I would have never thought to ask that. Like, maybe it is because his father was a chemist or had the degree in chemistry. It's just an odd thing to come about in general, in my mind. But like I said, maybe it is because of what his father did for work. So like I had mentioned earlier, his father didn't sense any red flags, and he was actually excited that Jeffrey was taking an interest in what he did for work, and so he actually taught Jeffrey how to bleach and preserve bones. So that's just a little bit of information of Jeffrey Dahmer and how he was brought up in his childhood, because there was a couple of sus things and red flags that happened in his childhood, which I think, looking back, I'm sure people that knew him thought that they would have said something, because there was some sus things. Fast forward to June of 1978 when Jeffrey committed his first murder. He was on his way home from the mall when he picked up a hitchhiker named Steven. Jeffrey took this 18-year-old back to his parents' house, where he then strangled Steven and then dismembered his body and put the body parts into garbage bags and disposed of him. Something odd that I didn't realize before researching this case is that he committed his first murder in 1978. However, he was then dormant, is that the word? He didn't kill till 1987. He actually joined the army and was stationed in Germany. However, in those 9 years that he didn't kill, he actually got discharged from the army for his problem with drinking. Even though he wasn't killing, he still got in trouble with the law. In August of 1982, Jeffrey was arrested and charged with indecent exposure, and he was charged only $50. what a time. Like, that's such a different time. 4 years later, he was charged with disorderly conduct for masturbating in front of 2 boys. He was charged and sentenced to counseling and 1-year probation. So 9 years after his first victim, September of 1987, Jeffrey kills again. So Jeffrey took a 24-year-old man named Steven back to his hotel room, where Jeffrey woke up the next morning and found Steven strangled dead beside him. He claims that he has no recollection of actually killing Steven. However, he did admit to dismembering his body, putting them in trash bags, and putting the pieces into trash bags and getting rid of the body. However, he did keep Steven's skull. He boiled it in bleach and industrial detergent, which pulverized the brittle skull. Just 1 month after Steven, he took a 14-year-old named James to his basement, well, his grandma's basement. Jeffrey told James that he would give him $50 if James posed nude for him, like a photo shoot. However, when they got back to his grandma's house, he drugged, strangled, dismembered James, and did what he did. Like, he's just a psycho. So then Jeffrey kind of cools down for a few months, but in March 1988, he meets Richard at a gay bar. He told Richard that he would pay him $50 to go home with him and spend the night with him. However, we all know that that did not happen. Jeffrey drugs him, strangles him, has sex with his corpse, and then dismembers his body. So Jeffrey was actually kicked out of his grandma's house because of the constant men Jeffrey brought home, and there was a foul odor coming from the basement where Jeffrey lived. His grandma had enough, kicked him out, so Jeffrey then rented a 1-bedroom apartment by himself. But like, let's pause on this fact. He killed his first victim at his parents' house, and then another one at his grandma's house, and like, I don't know, like, I just feel like so much could have been done. Like, this definitely did not need to happen. But September of 1988, he actually was arrested, not for murder, but for molesting a 13-year-old boy. However, like, there's so much that could have been done to prevent all of this. He literally spent a week, 1 week in jail, and then he got out on bail. He molested a 13-year-old, and he spent 1 week in jail. Make it make sense. Because somehow he was not locked up. He killed again in March of 1989. So he met Anthony at a bar, brought him back to his grandma's house because he believed that his apartment was being watched by police, because he was just arrested and should have been in prison. But Jeffrey then drugged and strangled Anthony, keeping and preserving his head and genitals, which he later kept in a box. He was sentenced to 1 year in jail, with work release, so he was allowed to keep his job outside of prison. He was also given 5 years of probation once he was released from jail, for sexual assault. I could not really get any clarity as to if this was the sexual assault on the 13-year-old boy or if he committed sexual assault again. I really hope it was for the 13-year-old boy, because if he got 1 week for the 13-year-old boy and then 1 year for another one, like, that, like, make it make sense. However, he was also required to register as a sex offender. He again was released after 10 months. He was released, and he again rented an apartment by himself in Milwaukee. But only 2 months after he was released, he did kill again. Raymond was a 32-year-old man who Jeffrey offered $50 for sex. So he again drugged him and then strangled him. Except this time he put his corpse in spicy poses and took Polaroid pictures. He then, you guessed it, dismembered Raymond's body. He did keep Raymond's skull and put it next to the other ones. And then he put his body pieces into acid to dissolve. So like I genuinely just don't know how, like, I just don't understand how he wasn't caught. Like, there's so many things are happening. So many things are happening. Like, he was arrested for molesting. He was arrested for sexual assault. He was discharged from the army. Like, he killed in his parents' house. He killed at his grandma's house. Like, I don't understand how he wasn't caught sooner. However, like I said, he was now living by himself in an apartment building, so his neighbors actually started to complain about a foul odor coming from Jeffrey's apartment. When the landlord had asked Jeffrey about it, he said that his fridge wasn't working and that he was just waiting for the fridge to be replaced or to be repaired. June of 1990, he did, of course, kill again, but this time he kept 27-year-old Edward in his freezer and later disposed of him. A few months after Edward, he kills again. However, he didn't stick to his typical drug and strangle routine. He actually slashed the throat of a 22-year-old man named Ernest. He actually kept his body to eat, he, like, this is so, like, next level. Like, this is like Ed Gein shit. He displayed his head in his apartment. Like, there's so much wrong with this. Like, that's not my type of decor, but like, oh my god. Like, who, like, I don't even like a moose head. I don't even like deer heads. Like, who puts a real head? Ugh. But 3 weeks later, he of course killed again 22-year-old David. He later realized, though, that he was not attracted to David, so he got rid of his body without keeping any parts of him. So, I guess David got off lucky? Can you get off lucky in this story? I don't know. Let's move on to 1991. February 1991, he did kill again. If you were losing track of how many people he's killed at this point, we are on number 10. He killed 17-year-old Curtis, doing his regular thing, drugging, strangling, taking pictures, eating, and keeping other parts as trophies. If you thought things couldn't get any worse, just a few months later, he killed 19-year-old Earl. However, this time, he, like, dragged it out. So he drilled a hole in Earl's skull and then poured acid into the hole in hopes that he could make Earl into a zombie, like, put Earl into a zombie-like state. But when Earl woke up, Jeffrey just ended up drugging and strangling him. So it didn't work. May 1991, he almost got caught. Again, like, I don't know how he gets away with so much stuff, and like, anyway, he, 31-year-old Anthony was dead on Jeffrey's floor when Jeffrey brought home another victim. The new victim, so Anthony is dead on the floor of there's so many names here. Anthony was dead on Jeffrey's apartment floor when Jeffrey brought home Connorick. Connorick was a 14-year-old boy, and he didn't succeed making somebody zombie-like, so he tried again. He tried again on Connorick. So he did this whole thing and drilled a hole into the skull, poured acid into the hole, but Jeffrey left Comerick in the apartment, and when he returned the next morning, Comerick was actually outside the apartment building with 3 girls huddled around him. So he went up to these girls and claimed that he was Comerick's friend. However, the girls weren't buying it, and they told Jeffrey that they already phoned the police. So then Jeffrey had to convince the police that him and Comerick were dating and that they just got into a drunken fight. Despite the 3 girls protesting this, the police let Jeffrey leave with Comerick. So, a little bit of a side note, but Comerick was actually the little brother of one of Jeffrey's other victims. Jeffrey had molested a boy in 1988. Like, could you imagine both of your kids, or like 2 of your kids, being the victim of Jeffrey Dahmer? Like, Jeffrey claims that he didn't know that they were related, But like, what a weird coincidence, honestly. Like, bad enough luck that one of your kids gets to be his victim, but two? Anyway, let's get back to the freaky shit. Jeffrey kept both Anthony, remember the dude that was dead on his floor, and Comerick's skulls. A lot of Jeffrey's stories to lure people back to his apartment involved a paid photo shoot. So a lot of these boys were actually aspiring models, or they were tight for cash. So this was the case for a Chicago native who actually flew to Milwaukee. 20-year-old Matthew flew from Chicago to Milwaukee, and the same shit ended up happening. Drugged, strangled, dismembered. However, Jeffrey kept Matthew's head and also froze several of Matthew's organs to later eat. Between July 7th and 19th, he killed 3 more victims, 20-year-old Jeremiah, 24-year-old Oliver, and 25-year-old Joseph. So nothing about those 3 killings really deviated from his usual patterns, other than Joseph was left dead on Jeffrey's bed for 2 days. Gross. Like, I don't know if he just curled up to him at night and like cuddled, but he was left dead on Jeffrey's bed for 2 days before Jeffrey took his head, put it in the fridge, and then disposed of his body. Finally, July 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer was forced to stop. 32-year-old Tracy flagged down 2 police officers, claiming that a freak, like, understatement of the century, but he claimed a freak had cuffed him and that he had to fight him to get away and get out of the apartment. So the officers went to investigate, and they went up to Jeffrey's apartment, where Jeffrey welcomed them inside his apartment, saying that yes, he did handcuff Tracy, and that the cuff keys were in his nightstand. So police entered his bedroom, and there was a partially opened drawer that had all of the Polaroid pictures that he had taken of the corpses in those spicy poses, and just all of these Polaroid pictures of Jeffrey's victims. When Jeffrey noticed that the policeman noticed these pictures, he did try to escape. However, he was not successful and he was arrested. Upon further inspection of his apartment, they actually found 5 human heads, 2 human hearts, 7 skulls, and a human torso. They also found preserved sex organs and 2 complete skeletons, as well as several hands and 3 other torsos submerged in acid. Jeffrey Dahmer's trial began January 20th of 1992. He was found guilty on February 17th of 1992. Jeffrey was then sentenced to 15 life sentences. However, karma caught his ass on November 28th of 1994 when he himself was murdered in prison. Christopher Scarver was in prison for 1 life sentence for committing murder. He is now in prison for 2 life sentences for committing 2 murders. He ended up beating Jeffrey to death, and he essentially said in interviews that it was because Jeffrey continually crossed the line. He had a sick sense of humor, and that like some people when they go to prison, they end up like changing and they change their ways. However, he noted that this was not the case for Jeffrey, and that yeah, he took justice into his own hands. So Jeffrey Dahmer is now dead. I believed he died in his 30s. Yeah, can you imagine killing 17 people? Or at least 15 people is what he was charged for, but I believe it's 17 people. Can you imagine killing 17 people before you're in your 40s? Like, I think he was like 32 or 37. He was in his 30s. Like, what the hell? What the hell? Keeping in mind, he was also in jail for like 4 years of his life before he died. What an interesting man. What a demented man. Wow. Like, I knew who Jeffrey Dahmer was before researching, but I definitely did not know all of this shit about him. Wow. So that is it for today's video, you guys. I hope you did enjoy. I post videos every single day in the month of October, so I hope you subscribe so you never miss a video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.